Referendums looks like a world with representation, transparency, and accountability. It looks like a better control of citizens on the politics and representation of minorities. Proud to propose. Before moving on to our team's argument, a few layers of analysis. First, characterization of healthy established democracy in the status quo. The first characterization here is that citizens all hold equal power of decision-making. We will elect congressmen to represent us. Second, when making for major decisions such as presidential voting, each individuals are given a chance to choose who they support for by lots of information provided to them in the status quo. Moving on to our team's model, what does direct democracy on our side look like? First, minimum number of Congress members will be elected by the regional citizens, and their roles are creating the laws for the citizens to pass. Each Congress members are going to focus on how to make a better society for their regions. However, they're not given any chance on what to vote for the laws. Second, policy decided by referendums will include when passing a law or for major policy decisions. Lastly, policy will only be passed if majority votes for approval. And we would like to clarify clearly by mentioning several things. Citizens must be informed clearly through the government's official statement of what they are going to vote for and what are the benefits for voting. Fake news and citizen manipulation is illegal. This is the case for both of the House and asymmetrical harm that should not be on the topic of today's debate. Lastly, Congress members will be immediately voted out if they are found with corruption or inappropriate actions. Then what does indirect democracy look like? A, people choose a representative who can decide important factors such as if the law is going to pass or not. B, people do not have a direct voice to decide whether or not how their role will frame. Judge, let us talk about some key principles of democracy. First, participation. Citizens should be guaranteed their ability to participate in politics, and it is not deniable that voting is the most important method of an average citizens to participate in politics. In our speeches, we will prove that this can be achieved through both referendums. Second, representation. Representation is the foundation of any representative democracy. Democracy is about one deciding by their country's fate, as citizens are the owners of the country. Now, moving on to our team's first argument, which is about how does our role lead to a better representative of citizens. Let's start off with a characterization of the world without referendums. Their alternative are indirect democracy, and this indirect democracy looks like a lack of representation. Two layers of analysis here. First, there are a limited number of Congress members allocated of each regions. This is very problematical because it is assigned with the population of the region. It means that even if the region has low voting interest, the population is what decides the vote power of the region, which seems super unfair for the region with higher voting rate, but with small population. Second, opinions of majority groups being totally ignored. On the opposition side, which is a world without a referendum, some politicians are going to agree on a law, and since the politicians are representing the region of the option they choose will be the only opinion on the state, and appears as if the region has totally agreed on the decision making. Because it is indirect democracy, first, there will be laws passed without the people actually acknowledging these laws. Second, individuals will have to follow a policy which they don't believe in, not giving a chance for them to have a say in the matter. If the referendum has at least the voice is reflected on the results of minority groups, having a chance to voice their options too, we believe this is a more better society and a more democratic world that the government side is very proud to propose. Before moving on to our team's second argument, is there any POIs?
Yes, POI.
Yeah, ask your question.
Okay, so I'm pretty sure the direct democracy is a democracy without representatives.
We frame as there would be, as I framed in our team's model, we've said that there would be, but there will be only small amounts of representatives, and they will not given any choice or voice to vote. Rather, they will only make the laws. Now, saying that said, I'll move on to our team's last argument, which is about how do referendums allow for better transparency. So in here, the premise of this argument is that in a representative democracy, in the status quo, Decision-making processes are often opaque, with policies and laws that are created behind closed doors and without direct input coming from the public. This lack of transparency obviously can erode trust in the government, and therefore, the decisions are not illegitimate. Judge, referendums refer to the government to present proposals for major policy, law, and amendments decisions to the public in a clear manner. All the proposals will be accessible to the public through TV and other media platforms. Therefore, citizens have access to very detailed information about the proposed policies, including their objectives, potential impacts, and any alternative opinions. It's similar to presidential voting. Citizens can give their opinions and viewpoints on that to decide on which decision would be optional for them. We think that referendums promote transparency, obviously, because we're making the decision-making processes more visible and accountable for the public. Citizens on our side can observe or investigate how policymakers respond to public feedback, and this increases the trustworthiness of the final decisions. In this argument, we also want to talk about better awareness towards the citizens. Since citizens only engage with policies by choosing the congressmen to represent them, the congressmen do their job really without communicating and collaborating with the citizens, of course. So even if laws are passed by the congressmen they choose, it is pretty likely that the citizens will not be happy in the end of the day. Moreover, referendums will also create public debate and discussions on key issues on various formats, including media platforms and online forums. This allows citizens to hear diverse viewpoints on a certain motion, which enables them to weigh and elaborate the potential harms and benefits of the society. This will allow them to make informed decisions. So overall, we support referendums because it strengthens democracy and increase civilians' engagement. And for these reasons, we are very proud to propose.
Panel, if we take a look at the government's world, do you seriously first think the entire population of a country would know what they're voting for? There are literally millions of people who vote who are illiterate, people with like special needs, who don't care about politics and are not knowledgeable in this field at all. Three things I'll be doing in my speech. First, I'll be rebutting to the previous speaker's points. Second, our counterfactual, and third, our arguments. So let me move on to our rebuttals. First, I don't think government understands the harms. They don't really consider their worst case scenario in this situation. First, they lack understanding and mechanization. In a direct democracy, when it's usually a day off in referendums and people don't have to go to work. But if you vote on all the key issues, I think that's a lot of days off. Not only that, but Prop is not clear about what constitutes as major policy decisions. So we would like to clarify, since Proposition does not do that in their first speaker. This includes the annual budget as well as significant policy changes, which happen like almost every month or even just like once a week. If each referendum is a holiday, it is going to significantly decrease the amount of productivity in society. It is clear in their world, clearly, they're not trying to be productive. They're trying to just they're just trying to live a non-productive life where they have like days off like once a week or something. They clearly lack mechanization and understanding of the motion. Second of all, they said that like indirect democracy lacks representation. So first, I would like to talk about how it's not like as if we're going to have a representative democracy for every single thing, which will be, I'll be further elaborating this in my counterfactual. I'll move on to my counterfactual now, which is on how in Congress, representatives are able to like represent the ideas and citizens need better. We do not want all the major government policies to be decided with referendum. What we want is a mix of representative democracy and referendums, just like in the status quo. An example of this is the United States. They do have Congress, and there are things that only Congress vote on, such as whether they want to pass new laws. These things, which are more political and require a lot of knowledge, should be done only by the Congress. However, things like presidential elections should be a referendum where everyone's vote counts. This is a different matter, right? People are voting for the best person who will represent their nation. These are things that affect the whole nation and each of one of you. Through this counterfactual, we not only protect the rights of to vote, the right to vote of the citizens, but also prevent oversimplification, which will be later extended on in my first argument. Remember, we're not saying that referendums should not exist in our world completely, but like the motion said, the motion states that every major government policy decision should be decided through referendum, and like we have clarified, since the government has not, these major decisions are going to be like happening once every week or something, because it's going to be including like talking about annual budget as well as like significant like policy changes. This side has a much bigger burden than us, panel, improving that all major government policies should be decided through a referendum, and prove why such harms that only exists in very niche situations is applied to every single situation. An example of like, okay, let me move, before I move on to my first argument, I'll take a POI if there's any. 3, 2.
Why do you assume that these major decisions happen every single week? That's so often.
Because you don't provide a clear characterization. If your first speaker did not provide a characterization, so now we'd like to frame it in the way we want to and define the way we want to define it. So, well, like we said, since referendums, it's like a public holiday usually, we'll just assume that there are public holidays like every week or like every month or something. Clearly, they don't want to have a productive society. Let me move on to our first argument, which is on oversimplification of societal issues and solutions of laws. So in the government's world, these people who are voting for like some laws to pass are the citizens, not some professionals that have studied in the field of law for decades. These people do not have deep political knowledge or know about all the major social issues happening and all like the credible and effective solutions to actually mitigate the issues. So multiple layers of analysis on this thing. People have different views and backgrounds naturally. So naturally, they have very different interests of what is going on in society. Second, chances are in their side, these people are not aware of societal issues in the first place and cannot comprehend what the solution the government is proposing will actually do to society. Literally, in the status quo, so many people are illiterate but still have voting rights. Do you think that these people actually know what they're voting for? Do you think that these millions of people have deep political knowledge to vote about laws when they can't even read? Clearly, they do not have the basic knowledge. So what we're curious about is, do these votes really matter when they're just in their world, even though millions of people are just voting? I don't think they're really expressing their true opinions, but rather just listening to who or what other people around them tell them to vote for. But our side has an actual credible and reliable representatives to actually represent the citizens' voice and who have studied the law and like social issues for literally like decades. They know the best of what is happening around the. Okay, so but our side has actual credible and reliable representatives to actually represent the citizens' vote, and these people have studied the law and social issues for decades. They know the best of what's actually happening. So major societal issues, each and every vote matters. Like we have stated, we have characterized the way we wanted to, since government has failed to characterize what major society issues looks like. They're also lacking productivity, which is something I'll talk about next. In our next speaker. Second, on waste of time and resources. There's a lot of government policies that need to be decided. Remember, Judge, a referendum requires the installation of voting booths, making voting days a holiday, organizing traffic, and using money and resources for campaigns and things. This means that proposition, a side that supports all government policies to be chosen by referendums, is very problematic. Isn't this the literal opposite of democracy? They should use their own time for their own gain. Their side questions the amount of government policies that should be passed in a POI. But we say, of course, it is true. It is true because the government has to care about so many things: education, criminal justice, humanitarian aid, international relations, social welfare, and whatnot, all require some sort of government policy decision. In the status quo, the reason we don't see the government bothering us with so many votes is because Congress literally exists. The Congress exists for these purposes and and we vote for our representatives. These representatives are the ones who speak for us, who represent us and represent our votes. And for all these reasons, I've never been prouder to oppose. Thank you.
3, 2, 1, now. They make two major assumptions in the LO speech. First, we're having this voting referendum every single week and every single days off. Second, citizens are so stupid. Well, some of these assumptions actually might be right. So let me prove you why this doesn't matter at all in our case of the debate. Let's start with the rebuttals. The counterfactual they suggest is the indirect democracy and the mix of direct democracy. Judge, this budget problem versus our impact of minority representation, we believe this is enough weighing that this budget problem isn't really that huge of a matter, right? And this counterfactual, like their counterfactual is literally that the experts will decide for them. Whereas if you have so many experts, why can't they tell the citizens about the campaign so easily if the citizens are so stupid, like your side is framing, right? And so therefore, more experts engaging with the citizens lead to more discussion of the citizens, which actually builds up the perspective of the public. And that's the democracy our side is talking about. And yeah, they also made an assumption about being a lot of days off. The assumption you guys are making here is that the major decisions are happening every day. What do we mean by major decisions? Probably that wasn't clear for their side. Okay, what do you mean by major decisions? This is like changing a law or a constitution, not like allocating a budget to a certain city, because obviously citizens are not economic experts. Okay, before I move on, I'll take the POI.
Okay, you talked about how you're going to teach the citizens about these kind of policies. Do you think that when you're talking about a policy related to international relations, you should teach every single citizen in this country about international relations?
Okay, the stakeholders we're talking about in today's debate, these are people who are interested to this voting, right? If you're a person who would rely on this international relationships, you would vote for that, right? Not every single citizen have to vote for every single subject. People vote for the ones which they impact them, right? That's the stakeholder analysis our side is providing. Not that the citizen has to be the expert on every single thing, because they're not the experts in the status quo anyways, right? Are they the experts of the president? No, but they're still voting for the president, even after being manipulated, like your side is saying. And they talked about how citizens have different interests going on, and that is exactly why your opinion cannot be represented by a few groups of people, because people have so much different opinions. And yeah, their second assumption about citizens cannot comprehend what the government that is proposing, and they have a minor stakeholder of illiterate people or something. But these illiterate people, just please note that they cannot vote for anything like in the first place unless they get the proper education of how to vote and why to vote, right? And the manipulation, this exists in both sides of the world through the media, especially where we have media and rights. And so what that these people are manipulated. No, thank you for the POI. Let me move on to the extension. First, the better representation of you. If you're a citizen that has your life depending on your vote, and again, our stakeholders don't have to vote for every single thing. They vote for the things that are detrimental for their life, right? Whether it is potential of being selected or not, it is only fair you to have a voice to be reflected on the decision, right? What does the indirect democracy look like? It appears as if your entire region is heading towards something, because these politicians are representing a single subject of these people. Minorities never have a chance to show to the public that they have different opinion, because they're just the majority opinion is the only thing being reflected on those groups of politicians. In our role, for each and every loss, minorities at least get a chance of their opinion actually being selected. And second, minor perspectives are at least reflected at all times. Before I move on to my third argument, I take the POI.
Okay, so could you please answer if all citizens have off work every time there's a referendum?
Well, as I mentioned, that efficiency part versus the problems of our minorities is pretty a light one. And even if we make a trade-off that we might make a lot of budgets and that's inefficient, what is the weighing that this debate must head to, right? That weighing will actually be presented by our whip speaker of efficiency versus this. Yeah, that's the obvious trade-off our side has to make, which is totally fine with us. Moving on to our third argument, less power abuse of the politicians. Premise of this argument is that citizens have more power to hold on politicians accountable for actions. And even before the mechanism, what is the impact of this accountability argument? So what politicians are held accountable? Well, less power abuse of the politicians. We propose three on impact through two mechanisms. First, less power abuse of the politicians. Second, politicians serving for citizens. And at the end, leading to the impact of better quality of life for the citizens, which both sides has to protect. And how does politics abuse impact our world in the status quo? It looks like ignoring the minority lives and better life, offering a better life for the powered and rich ones who has the ability to lobby these politicians. And why is this likely? What is our mechanism? And now we see the impact. How is it possible? For the first assumption that less power abuse for the politicians, the incentive of the politicians is to hold greater power and their party possessing more wealth. This means that regardless of what citizens want, after getting elected as a Congress, their incentive immediately changes for their party. If the Congress is not the ones to make the laws, but just to process these laws, the countless politicians with corruption immediately loses power, and this lobbying and all the impacts I mentioned are gone immediately. And second, about as politicians serving the citizens. In our world, it is not the politicians' role to make the decision and manipulation of citizens' life. We frame these politicians with people having power of the citizens gathered all together, selected on these selected people. The power distribution to the citizen provide citizens the fiat over the politicians who are in control of their lives somehow in the status quo, which blocks the possibility of these politicians cherry-picking the policies for their favorite actors. Which, George, let me last point. Their entire speech about the efficiency and citizens being stupid, well, I successfully rebutted the citizens being stupid part. So if we successfully make a trade-off about this efficiency part, their entire logic just falls apart, right? So I'll leave that on to our third speaker, more than proud to propose.
Panel, please notice that they did not engage in their worst case, where citizens are not knowledgeable and get swayed by misinformation. The democracy in their place is a fake democracy and all the different harms at that, right? First of all, moving on to rebuttals. The DPM says that like the budget matter is not a problem, but the federal budget is extremely complicated and extremely important. So that makes it a major decision. Instead of like having an expert legislation like do this, proposition would put a major decision up for referendum, right? Like, we're gonna explain more, but an example of a major decision could be something like whether or not to aid Ukraine. Instead of having like expert representatives decide this, proposition world would just like take off work to have the public decide. Also, it's not like this is gonna take one day, right? It's gonna take a long period of time, and I will like elaborate on this like later in my speech. And second of all, they said that misinformation will not be the case, and like people are going to explain to the citizens in a very detailed and like concise way. But then this is a really time-consuming matter. No one can watch all these cases being made for this policy for or against this policy, right? Did you know that for a law or major policy to get enacted, there needs to be a significant amount of time to go through all the details and complexities, and not like major policies are it's not like major policies are one-liners that is like, oh, the state will not from this point on ban abortions nationally. This is not the case, right? Major policies not look like this. They have many things to consider. It's not like just one faceted thing. For the abortion laws, in this example, there needs to be other solution policies that will like help the policy get enacted. Like, for example, there needs to be other policies like, oh, there's going to be more healthcare experts that are going to be hired. The medical community will receive more money. Like, these types of complex policies need to exist in order to like enact one policy, right? So, and another thing is that like a law or policy is not something that affects one group of people. It directly affects multiple groups and communities, right? So it's not like everyone knows like all the complex problems, and they do not have the time to sit around watching for 10 straight years of whether to or not to like support abortion or not. And also they had a major contradiction saying that, oh, everyone is interested in voting, but then they also said that not every single person needs to vote. This is literally a contradiction, right? If everyone cares so much, like why won't they vote? Like what are they saying, right? We are extremely confused, but we will elaborate and engage to both of their contradicting cases. Also, the deputy comes up to the podium and suddenly changes their side's definitions, right? They suddenly say that their side is not talking about things like international relationships, but like, what are you talking about? The international relationships are literally major policies, right? What are people going to vote for on their side? The Congress and policymakers have to deal with so many different topics like education, criminal justice system, social welfare, international relationships, etc., etc., etc. They have so many things to deal with, and their side literally says that all the citizens, like nationwide citizens, are gonna sit around watching TV about like whether this policy should be enacted or not. And also the deputy also talks about like how they can get rid of not lobbying, but if they suddenly like minimize the definition of major government policy decisions so drastically, which is also a contradiction, then doesn't that mean that there's going to be more places where we have to use representatives, like in our case? Like if they want to achieve the benefits of no bribing, like they shouldn't try to minimize the definition of government policy decisions, right? They should try to make it bigger. They are contradicting themselves literally. I'll take your POI.
Won't the citizens study enough for the laws that actually impact their lives and the future?
Okay, so what they're saying is absolutely trash. They're saying that the average normal citizen is going to study law every day. They're gonna read law books and care about society, right? But this is not the case. In our side, like the people who are enacting major policy and actually like vote for them to be enacted, they are like professionals who spend 10 years studying in the law. They know all about the society's issues and they are well aware. In their side, like the average normal citizen doesn't know about like all these social like problems, and they do not care at all, right? It is not within their interest to go study law every day, like read law books every single day. Like they are not that informed. They are not professionals who have the capability to address like these complex problems, right? Also, they also, I mean, in our side represents, they also said that, okay, sorry, I'll organize. Okay, so their side also ran the case about like representatives having no diversity and do not represent the citizens' values or ideas at all. But then look, these representatives are not just like the same people with the same opinions. In order for them to get elected in the first place, they need some connections with the normal citizens, right? This means that the Congress is not only made up of like ignorant white men as a majority, but will also have diverse people with the proper knowledge needed to pass as a policy. That is our exclusive benefit, right? These people are professionals who studied law for like a lot of years. The citizens on their side literally clicks on the check or X marks on whether to pass a law or not without reading anything. Like they have no knowledge, but then they're suddenly like clicking on whether they should enact this law or not without no knowledge about this topic at all. Also, these representatives on our side are like not the same people with the same opinions as we stressed before. In order to like gain votes, there needs to be a major connection with the normal citizens, right? That means that there will be more diversity on our side, and people will actually vote for the representatives who actually represent the people best. And also we agree with DPM that manipulation of the public will happen in both worlds, right? But this is obviously when like the larger problem on the proposition side, because they will have the public make more government decisions, right? We cannot trust every single citizen to know thoroughly about like every single law that is going to be enacted. We cannot trust them to click on check marks or X marks without completely understanding what the law entails, right? These are major laws, and major laws take so many years to get enacted in the first place. We believe that in terms of feasibility, we win 100%. Their side cannot propose a model, and their side cannot characterize the world clear enough, and we do not understand how their world is going to work, right? We already characterized to you, it is so many, it consumes time so much, and people cannot just sit around watching TV every single day. And it is simply not just going to happen in their side. Thank you.
Judge, your vote will literally decide your future. Why is opposition assuming that citizens will make irrational decisions when their lives depend on the law? Judge, we think it's clear that we're winning this debate currently. Why? Because opposition hasn't fulfilled their burden of proof at all. They had the burden to prove how individuals can actively participate in political needs, including the process of passing the law. They just repetitively assert that referendums are not feasible. They don't address this at all. One of opposition's POIs was, aren't there no representatives or congressmen at all in direct democracies? However, let us clarify, we're not an absolute direct democracy. We have already explained this in our model. That we just have referendums. Also, opposition, please be respectful respectful for our side and watch your language. Before I move on, let's talk about feasibility of getting the law. They say it takes too many years to get the mainstream law, but that is in the status quo where people have to vote for the Congress and that Congress has to vote for it again. That's why feasibility is a symmetric and irrelevant point. Judge, in my speech, I would like to present to you two clashes. Straight on to our first clash. Which side allows for better satisfactions of the citizens? Judge, we have proved to you in our speeches that referendums ensure better representation of citizens compared to indirect democracy. We made a clear comparison for you. In indirect democracy, in the status quo, limited numbers of Congress members allocated for each region result in very unfair representation as regions with higher populations hold an unequal amount of power. Moreover, we talked about how minority groups' opinions are often ignored in that indirect democracy, leading to policies that do not reflect the diverse perspectives within the population. With referendums, citizens' voices are directly reflected in policy decisions transparently. Therefore, there is a fairer and more inclusive representation of the diverse viewpoints in the world. Government keep asserting that millions of people won't all know much about politics. But however, as mentioned by the Prime Minister, we already explained why citizens will have enough information in order for them to understand and vote for what they support. Since there are diverse people in society, there will be people who do not understand. However, this cannot act as a factor to not give them a chance. The government also says that people are being swayed. However, Judge, what's so bad about being swayed? What is the impact? None, according to the opposition, since they don't explain the impact of anything. So what they repetitively say about people being swayed does not stand at all. Plus, with more interactions and discussions about political matters that we proved will happen more on our world, it is unlikely that these populations will be exploited or something. Plus, it's the same for presidential elections on their side, so this harm can be symmetrical. Moving on to our second clash, which side allows for better systems within the democracy? Judge, in our second argument and speeches, we have proved to you how referendums promote transparency in decision-making processes, and this better allows for accountability and trust in the government. In representative democracies, decision-making processes are often opaque, leading to a lack of trust and legitimacy in government decisions, of course. Referendums require the government to present proposals for major policy decisions clearly to the public, fostering an open debate and more discussions. This transparency allows citizens to fully understand proposed policies, unlike the status quo, then evaluate the potential impacts, whether it's going to be good for them or not, and hold policymakers accountable for their decisions better. In addition, we talked about how referendums increase civic engagement by encouraging public participation and promoting awareness of political issues among citizens. I'll get the POI. No? Okay. So now let us discuss one of the main assertions of the opposition. Chat POIs, please. That referendums are such a waste of resources and time. Side opposition says our definition or characterization isn't clear and just assume that there are major changes of law in this world every week, that there will be weekly referendums and they will miss so many days of work. We've recharacterized what we call major decisions because opposition simply did not understand this well. We say that there are important changes in law and the constitution that affect a huge part of the population. It's not just about minor issues like allocating resources in minor fields in the society. They also say it's unrealistic to have everyone to vote. Yeah, it is unrealistic for everyone to vote. Our second speaker told you that citizens will selectively vote for their interested policies. Of course, everyone is allowed to vote, but if you're a doctor that you do not have to care about the international relationships, you simply do not vote. But if you're a diplomat that has a good knowledge and interest to this law, you will rationally think what is best for you and then go vote to decide your future. Now we'd like to move on to the government's counterfactual, the mix of indirect democracy and referendums. Judge, this statement cannot be made by opposition because they're indirectly stating that referendums are good. They list multiple harms of referendums and some are assumptions, of course. They talk about days off at work, the stupidity of citizens and how citizens who are illiterate and have disabilities, and others. So they're making a huge contradiction by saying so. But even if this is possible, we want to reduce the representation of the congressmen and representatives to its minimum to minimize corruption, and as we want better transparency in the policy and law in the decision making in general. So now finally to discuss efficiency versus better democracy. This is about the trade-off we're talking about. The events that are taking place, they don't take place every day or every week, but in few months. This budget isn't that tremendous compared to the amount of budget corrupt politicians waste. Please face the reality in the status quo, tens of politicians being unused for the corruption. Even if this is not true, Judge, if this is the main impact they're suggesting, they didn't explain why taking days off for vote is important and why this will occur. So what do you take days so what? You take days off to change your future. Why is that not important? So what do you take days off to discuss and decide the future of your country? That is important. So we're making a trade-off here and it's completely valid. And for all these reasons, we are proud to propose.
Judge, no world is perfect, but efficiency actually matters, right? Notice how the government whip is even reluctant to take a POI because of the fact that they know that their points are so shaky, right? Because Judge, when you think about it, efficiency is an incredibly big idea in this debate, right? When you think about it, if your nation is getting attacked, for example, let's say North Korea shot a missile at South Korea, how long is it going to take if you have a referendum for choosing whether to not attack back, right? When you think about it, if that is the case on their side, because South Korea will have to waste time and money to wait for politicians to actually create a law that actually says that okay, we're going to attack back, and then they're going to have to host campaigns and then do advertisement to actually vote for their thing. And then third of all, they would actually have to install booths and voting booths for people to actually cast a vote in the referendum, and then they would have to wait for the people to actually calculate the votes hand by hand because their side is so paranoid about like corruption and stuff. So their side would be so careful like shooting the votes and calculating them, right? So you're going to spend so much time and money actually calculating them, and then you're going to have to announce the votes, and then South Korea would actually be able to make a move. But then their side also adds extra points to here because their side is saying, okay, the average person, maybe if they don't have the information, we're going to teach them. Okay, then we have to make pamphlets, we have to make campaigns to actually teach about this kind of topic. If North Korea attacks South Korea, then okay, these politicians would make campaigns that teach South Koreans about the history of North Korea and South Korea. They're going to teach them about the current status between South Korea and North Korea. If that is the case, you're wasting so much time and money when efficiency is so important, right? If war is imminent, you need to have decisions made right now, and that is literally why Congress exists, and that is why presidents are allowed to have a very emergency authority to actually have some sort of emergency power, right? That is why efficiency so much matters in this status quo, and the fact that there's just saying, you wasting time, efficiency, budget, they don't really matter, and just literally dismissing this point is so illogical, right? I am so proud to oppose, right? Two things I'll be doing further in my speech. I'll be first of all rebutting to their opponent to their whips major points. Two, I'll be introducing the major clashes. First of all, they say that, well, direct democracies, they lack representation. But Judge, when you first of all think about it, if you're a minority, it is the exact same thing on their side as well. Because Judge, when you think about it, democracy favors the majority. It is the same thing on their side as well. Because if the 80% of the world thinks that the 20% minorities like ideas should be kind of silenced, then the fact that 80% of the people vote for the law that goes against minorities would be kind of passed, right? On our side, even if they are minorities, it is the exact same situation. So it is incredibly symmetrical when you think about it, right? If there's a minority that needs to have their voices heard, but they're only like 5% of the entire population and no one even supports them, it is symmetrical on either side that their sides and their votes will not be actually calculated in the status quo, right? But the fact that but the reason why our side is actually better for minorities is because politicians want to have a good image, right? They want to have the image that they are the ones that actually work for the minorities, right? So therefore, politicians actually go out and do polls, right? In the US, like you can see a lot of congressmen actually going out and asking people what kind of laws they want, right? And what kind of laws they want it to be voted, right? They want to listen to the minorities because they want to have the minorities votes to support that congressman, right? They want to get the minorities to vote for them when they become a congressman, right? So therefore, actually on our side, these congressmen are more likely to vote for the minorities, or even if they don't, it is still symmetrical because on both sides, minorities don't really have a voice because they're silenced by the majority anyway, right? Second of all, about how it's really not important about being swayed. What? Like we believe that being swayed is an incredibly dangerous argument because when you think about it, the fact that there's even talking about bias is when like they're saying like, okay, these politicians, they are going to like do advertisement stuff, right?
POI.
in the status quo, like even in the past, there has been cases where like politicians, like these people will like bribe the citizens so that they will actually do something for them, right? They believe that we at least believe that these politicians, they're really open, right? These politicians, they represent the ideas of a party, not a person, right? These congressmen, they are the ones that represent the ideas of, like, for example, the Conservative Party, right? And how this even works is that these congressmen would think like, okay, the average conservative American would want this vote, want this thing to be passed or not.
POI.
For this, right? We believe that is incredibly important into the ideas that this kind of bias would actually not even happen, right? We believe that judge, because the average person doesn't really have information about every single topic that exists in the world, they are really highly likely to listen to the closest politician, right? They're highly likely to listen to the things that the politician says because they don't really have a voice or what this even is, or they don't even care about it, right? Because when you think about it, the average grandma abortion, right? The average grandma wouldn't care about like if we actually bomb Ukraine or whatnot, right? So we believe that at least if this is the case, then this kind of arguments all doesn't stand. Yeah, I'll take up PY now. Hello?
What's the impact of people being swayed? So what? Doesn't that occur on your side with presidential elections too?
Well, if presidential elections, it is at least the president that's telling the people and is representing a party, right? The president represents a party, and at the end of the day, a party is open, a party is clear, and you can see what a party supports, right? If you're a conservative American, for example, or a liberal American, you know that what the liberal party generally supports, right? For example, the liberal party would generally support abortion, right? So, for example, a liberal congressman would probably vote for abortion because they're the ones that literally represent the ideas that they want to support abortion, right? So the fact that they are also personally people that support abortion, this is highly likely that these people would actually vote for the things that they're actually trying to support, right? But on their side, because it is the average citizen that is voting for every single thing, the average person they can listen to like fake news on the internet, right? They can listen to like the fake news on Instagram and TikTok and think that it's actually real, and they can actually use it to cast a vote, right? But the average politician, they have a lot of information, they have a lot of professional knowledge on why this is actually true. So we believe that is kind of objectivity is actually very important, right? Moving on to like how there's like budget is not small and politicians get bribed. First of all, how do they just assume that all politicians are gonna get bribed, right? Because once again, I already kind of disproved why this is not true. But second of all, the budget of like actually creating a booth and actually hosting campaigns is incredibly big, and the amount of time consumed is incredibly dangerous, right? We believe that if like a nation is getting attacked and you have to make a new policy that you can actually attack North Korea and whatnot, if that is the case, then you have to waste so much time and money on their side, and they're just trying not to engage with this, which is very problematic. Now, moving on to questions of this debate. First of all, which side is much more efficient in actually fixing a problem, right? Our side is clearly the one that wins here because we're saying here, Judge, because it is clear that in a situation where like North Korea bombs South Korea, we need to have clear and very quick decisions to be made, right? On their side, if you have like a referendum, you need to have like campaigns, you need to install the voting booths, and then because their side cares so much about transparency, you would also care about like voting it calculating the voting results one hand by hand, and then you also have to educate the people and whatnot. That is such a waste of time and money. I don't think I even have to elaborate further, right? Second of all, which side has a better votes and better policies in general? Our side is the one that stands here because first of all, they talk about minorities, but then once again, minorities, the fact that there's ideas are very silenced in society is symmetrical, so it doesn't really matter. But second of all, we believe that we're actually able to support the people's needs better because it is the politicians that know what this party actually clearly supports, right? So for example, if Texas is known to be a very conservative state, the fact that Texas's congressman would vote for a law that is very conservative, then it is pretty clear what they're going to do, and we believe that it is actually representing the people because it is at the end of the day democracy, and I am so proud to post. Thank you.
So their side proposes a utopia that is unrealistic, where every person nationwide casts a vote after being thoroughly educated for like a decade, in a world where every single day is a holiday, simply because these government policies are very hard to decide upon. But then our side has professionals who represent diverse citizens and have so much knowledge about law and how things actually work, and they can cast a illegible vote for the people. So they literally said if people do not care, then they can just not vote. However, recognize this is a national government. This is a really important decision to make. If you don't care, then just don't care. That's literally what they said. The citizens are being affected in a nationwide scale. However, they propose to people that, if you care, you can just like watch the case unfold before your eyes. But then if you don't, like just sit around and go on a holiday, right? They do not represent like all of these diverse people, and their side just like trashes the whole case. we continuously tell you that holding a referendum is a really complex thing. It's not as simple as like, you know, like just clicking in a checkbox or an Xbox, right? We already said this, we already characterized this so much throughout the whole debate. They did not engage. Please listen clearly to their every single word, right? You're gonna hear so many contradictions. Like they literally changed their model throughout the whole debate, like every second. But then let's be charitable and listen to their very unrealistic characterization done by the proposition. We will just assume that somehow everyone is interested in voting and that everyone somehow will learn about international relationships and whatnot and all the major issues going on. Still, this is so time consuming. We already characterized you so many times. There are so many issues to deal with, right? The nation is not just like pro-abortion or like not pro-abortion. Like it's not that simple. People need to learn about all of these stuff in order to cast a vote. That's literally what they're saying. But is this possible? Is this feasible in the first place? No, we have characterized to you so much they did not engage. We believe that this is so time consuming and there are so many issues to deal with. This is simply not possible. The proposition has to stick with our characterization and how we describe that what major government policy decisions are, right? They didn't really do that in their side. But then let's look at their worst case, right? If South Korea is attacked, as the whip speaker said, they're first gonna teach like whether like why they are being attacked to the whole nationwide citizens, right? Even when their country is in the middle of being attacked, right? I don't think the proposition understands urgency and doesn't engage or characterize this point at all. They are literally wasting money every single day. Like every single day is a holiday because like it's so time consuming. People need to be educated enough in order to cast a vote, and that's going to take at least a decade. And their side, they're just gonna be so less productive than us. And in the worst case, they're just gonna be attacked by North Korea in the South Korea like idea we propose. If that means that like they can gather everyone's opinion, right? Notice that this is a democracy, right? Everyone's opinion matters, but then we are the one who is doing like all of the characterization for you. Like everyone's opinions are represented through these representatives that people actually vote. These are professionals who know everything about the law. These are professionals who have studied law for decades, right? We cannot trust every single person to know complex stuff like international relationships, abortion, or like the national government stuff we are proposing, right? So we believe that it is impossible for their case to propose what they are proposing right now, and we believe that feasibility matters. Thank you.
Judge, they take one better point in today's debate. They're obviously good at insulting our side, calling us terrible, trash, shut up, and shaky. Just because you tell the judge that our side has changed the model, it doesn't mean that they're persuaded if it's not true, right? When our model stayed consistent. And one explanation made by OB on their side is that politicians will want to have a good reputation, which is not true because politicians in the status quo are corrupt, and many of them are with a good reputation, right? And there are mainly two clashes that wasn't engaged by two main points on their side. First, about the information and how minority, like some of the people will not be able to access those information. First of all, just because some illiterate people cannot vote for something smartly as good as an expert, it doesn't mean that the entire vote must be abolished. Second point about people being swayed and manipulated, but they don't propose any impact why people being swayed is so important, right? It can be an important part, but they must have explained why is that important, right? Is that principally wrong? Is that democratically wrong? What's wrong about people being swayed, right? Even if you assume the impact, there's literally just admitted that their third speaker admitted that swaying is existing in the presidential election on their side as well. And they said it's okay. Well, what's the difference between manipulation in presidential elections versus on our side, the constitution changing, blah, blah, blah. What is the difference, right? And as I mentioned, the stakeholders who are voting are the ones who have the incentive to vote, who has the incentive to vote. Our third speaker gave you an example. If you're a doctor who don't really have to care about the international politics, you won't go for that vote and you won't take a day off. If you are a diplomat who is actually interested and your life is impacted depending on this law, you will study as much as an expert to go on there, throw your vote and make your future there, right? And their second point about the resources and government not wasting the resources. Judge, what are these resources for? Is it for just like leaving there and wait it until it turns to a gold? No, it's to make a social development. And this, I think this policy is part of making a social development and those democratic impacts we propose, right? Just because you guys insult us with this case doesn't mean that this clash is fall upon. At the end, both of the points about information and resources exists in their side as well, because obviously their side has the direct vote as well. And second of all, resources, yeah, we obviously made a trade-off of that, and those resources are for these kind of developments. So both of the harms they're talking about exist in their side, and their job was to prove the unique benefits of those politicians voting in favor of the citizens, which they didn't. They just explained why this is a waste of resources, which wasn't their job to win this debate. Proud to propose.